Greetings and salutations, this is Emperor Vespasian and his trusty sidekick.
Hello!
We're bringing you our BA10 armoured cars for our Soviet army. We have 5 BA10s so far.
We were supposed to have 6, but converted one into a...
No, that wasn't the BA10s, that was the tanks.
Oh.
So we have 5 so far because they operated in that sort of size unit. Armoured cars in bolt action are pretty much the same as light tanks, which is just the same as real life, because your Soviet armoured cars carried a anti-tank gun. In fact, the same anti-tank gun that was mounted on the BT7. The BT7 and the T26. It was an anti-tank gun, a bog standard anti-tank gun. That meant that Soviet armoured cars could kill anything, any tank that any enemy had during the first part of the Second World War. This means that really you have to double the amount of tanks that you class the Russians as having. So when you look at pieces of paper saying the Russians have X thousands of tanks, you then have to add the armoured cars to it because they have the same armour and the same gun. The only difference is they're on wheels. So really these are tanks. They're fast tanks, they're fast moving tanks. And so unlike the German army and other armoured cars, British army, generally you regard those as light armoured cars armed with a machine gun or a cannon, with the exception of the Daimler, which has a 2-pounder gun attached to it. So most armoured cars have a machine gun added to it. Soviet armoured cars have an anti-tank gun. So these are really light tanks. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also take into effect that the T26 armour, even though it's a light tank, its armour is 7, because 7 plus, which is because it's so ramshackle, is made out of tin. It's got the same armour as one of these, so it is actually the same as a T26, and yet it has the same armament, and yet it's fast, so it's quicker. It also has the recce special rule, and the recce special rule is one of the coolest rules in bolt action because it means when you are fired at, instead of going down or firing back, whatever you do to react, you can actually choose to withdraw. So you can take one turn away from the enemy, which is a very useful skill to have. I like that skill. The cavalry have it as well, the Polish cavalry, which is useful. Also, a slight benefit making this better than the Russian T26, which is your standard tank. The T26 only has one machine gun, which can only be fired if its main gun isn't firing. Whereas this armoured car has 2 machine guns. One of them is mounted next to the main gun, so it will have to fire the machine gun or the main gun. But it has one in the hull that can always fire. The one at the front, you can see that. So that can always fire. So technically you can choose not to fire your anti-tank gun and have 8 dice to fire as machine guns, as MMGs. And that's quite a lot of firepower.
Oh yeah.
This is why I like the Japanese army, because the Japanese tanks tend to have 3 machine guns.
And the head turns around.
Yeah, because it's got 3 machine guns. So you can use the back of the turret's got a machine gun, so you can use that machine gun facing forwards to fire 3 machine guns.
That's their old version.
And that's their old version. Yeah, because they knew what they were doing. They had combat experience, they knew what they were doing. The Russians did too. Although most armies used armoured cars for reconnaissance or police duty, which is duty in the rear, anti-partisan duty, the Soviets used their armoured cars alongside tanks. So they would use them together because the Russians knew what an armoured car was. So you can technically use them as part of your armoured corps, and not just use them for recce, but you can use them as a reconnaissance unit as well. You can use them on their own. I think they're very useful things, and I think they're one of the things that sets the Russian army apart. The fact that their armoured cars can pretty much kill anything. The nearest you get, I suppose, to the German army will be having something like the Puma, and the late war Puma. Because the late war Puma was a Rad 8 with a big heavy anti-tank gun mounted on it. But the Russians had 7,000 of these. I mean, 7,000.
They were lying on that a lot.
Yeah, the Germans invaded with what, 1,250 tanks. That's the entire German army with tanks, and that includes armoured cars. The Russian army had 7,000 armoured cars, like this, with an anti-tank gun. And then we're going to start on tanks. The Russians were horrifically outnumbered the Germans. So you have this. It's got a 45mm anti-tank gun, very effective. It's got 2 machine guns, one of which can fire all the time, which is effective against infantry. It has the Recce special rule, which is one of the coolest rules in bolt action. Sorry, I love that rule. I just love it. What are you doing, you strange person? Right, you just sit in the corner and don't move. And of course, it can carry out. You can be used as a Recce.
So that's your favourite rule. My favourite rule is fanatics.
Yeah, because you fight with armies with Fanatic special rule. What does Fanatics really do for you? It makes you survive.
To the very last man.
Yeah, in close combat it's very handy because it means that even if you don't die, you can still carry on fighting.
Yeah.
And let's have a look. If it loses morale, it still carries on fighting as well, isn't it? Or is it ignore pins? I can't remember one of them. Ignore pins, right. So that's it. That's all I've really got to say about it. Now I'll go on to questions. Questions?
Questions? You keep mixing up. Tactics.
Yeah, but do you actually have any questions this time? Because
no, I don't really.
Why not? You used to have loads of questions.
Yeah, see, the thing is, if I repeat myself on different vehicles where exactly the same from other armies, then people can say, oh, I said that before. I said that before too.
Yeah, but not someone who's watching the one about the Russian army is not necessarily going to watch one about the Chinese army. So feel free to ask, and it might be different. The answer might be different for this army. So, questions? No?
Why did they stick a cannon on an armoured car in the first place?
Added firepower.
On an armoured car?
So, yeah, in the interim years, the Russians were actually behind everybody else. So they needed large amounts of... they needed to augment their armed forces. So they very quickly went to getting a normal truck, which is all this is, putting some armour on it and sticking a gun on the top. And they mounted it with the anti-tank gun, which is useful because it can kill other armoured cars.
But armoured cars might just have machine guns.
Yeah, for what they do, yes, because armoured cars are not meant to take on enemy tanks. Armoured cars are designed militarily to use as reconnaissance, meaning you're not going to come up against enemy tanks. Technically, you should never really use German armoured cars in a battle of bolt action because German armoured cars would run away as soon as they saw a tank. They weren't trained. They weren't ordered to fight. They were supposed to spot and then leave really quickly.
And then tell the army where their positions are. Yeah.
In the Battle of France, German armoured cars would be sent forward as reconnaissance. And they would bomb down the road at 45 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they would drive through a town at 50 miles an hour, and as it drove through the town, they would just, in panic, machine gun the buildings as they drove through. And then carry on going and go to the next town, keep going, right? Because they didn't want the French to try and catch up with them and take them on. So then you had the French police and the army reporting, there's German tanks here, there's German tanks there, there's German tanks there. So you had people sending troops to every single town. Even though they literally drove through the town and carried on going. They were just using the road. That's all they were doing. And that's how the Battle of France fell apart, because you had all these reports coming in from everywhere. There were German tanks everywhere, and they generally weren't. Usually there were armoured car units that were just bombing through the town really quickly and leaving and getting out of there because they suddenly found themselves in the middle of a town surrounded by Frenchmen, and it was scary. So just an interesting point. They first happened in the second. It also happened in the Second World War during the German breakthrough, when the Germans broke through our lines in 1918. Their armoured cars drove behind our lines. They suddenly got onto open road and started driving, and the crews just panicked and they just drove around until they ran out of fuel. Just drove at full speed all over the countryside because they didn't know where they were and ran out of fuel. But it caused massive panic because they thought the German army was everywhere, and it wasn't. In fact, most of the German army was marching slowly. So, yeah. Anyway, that's besides the point. Second thing to mention is, and as far as the Soviet tactics were concerned, the idea was you would break through the enemy lines with your big heavy tanks, your light tanks would then soak up what was left, and then the armoured cars would go through and carry on going, and they would take the fight to the enemy. And usually armoured cars would be equipped with cavalry. So you'd actually have men on horseback and men on fast trucks going alongside the armoured cars, and they would get into the enemy rear, link up with your VDV paratroopers and any partisan units. The downside to it was the Russians didn't really get to do that because the Germans came the other way. The Russian army wasn't designed for the type of warfare they ended up fighting by the time the Second World War began, as far as history books are concerned, in earnest. So that's another thing which probably needed mentioning. Over to you for tactics. What are your armoured car tactics?
Sport infantry.
Sport infantry, yeah. That's what I'd say. That's really what I use them for. But I do like wrecking. But
So I like them to be sending first. They get the bullet magnet, and the infantry come out from behind, machine gun the infantry.
yeah, well, I don't know. I tend to keep armoured cars in reserve, don't I? If
Yes.
it's a set battle, I keep them at the back because they can move quickly to help.
Apart from gliders.
Yeah,
When the
gliders.
When the gliders came, you just drove your armoured car through, machine gun everyone on the left.
Yeah, I basically did a recce on you. I just ran away.
And the infantry squad was wiped out, and all I had left was one mortar squad, and you couldn't take it out because you didn't see where it was.
Yeah.
And you couldn't fire because you were too close.
Oh yes, of course, I remember that. I couldn't actually use my gun. I've got a high-mounted gun, so I can't use my machine. If I'm assaulted and I'm stationary, I can't use my machine gun because my machine gun won't depress to the level of a human.
And then I used my anti-tank gun and shot him
Yeah.
3 times because I couldn't kill him. It took forever.
Wasn't that the one where I couldn't move? I was immobilised.
Yes.
Yes, that was it. Yeah. So I
And
couldn't.
the flame floor team came up and burned you alive.
Yeah, I couldn't fight you and you couldn't fight me technically. So we just I remember that.
Stand off.
Yeah, a slight downside which we do use if the occasion arises is the machine gun cannot be depressed. So if you've got infantry assaulting it, technically you can't. There's no way the armoured car can fight back, bar maybe firing a pistol through the vision.
Through the door.
Yeah. So the armoured car cannot actually fight back. Although the rules do allow it to fight back, sometimes we say
otherwise
no, you can't.
they'd be stupid if you can't, wouldn't it?
Well, no, they couldn't. They weren't designed to do that. And that is how a lot were taken out by infantry, because they couldn't see the Germans running around them.
That's why you have supports.
Which is why that's why you have support in
to clear them off.
Yeah, and which is why armoured cars are often supported by little light tanks, tankettes, to spray infantry off of the tanks.
Oh wait, a tank has the really, really tiny vehicle.
Yeah, the little 1 or 2 man vehicles with a machine gun. That's what they're for. They're there to spray down your own tanks to get the ants crawling all over the side of the tank off the infantry off the tanks. But hey, that's warfare. That's what it's like in real life. So in bolt action, armoured cars are awesome because Russian armoured cars are the best armoured cars you could possibly ever have. I will qualify that with early war.
Early war, yeah.
Yeah. Late war, these things are dead the moment they move. If you try and use something like this early on, it's going to get killed because everything has a really good gun. But at early war, these are pretty good. So that ends this video. I have nothing else to say on it.
No?
So over to you.
So if you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe. And comment down below what you think of the armed car for the Russians, and we'll answer them in the comments.
Yeah.
That's everything from me.
And that's everything from him. Good day.
See ya.